Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the National Bleav Network. And joining me are a couple of experts on the Texans draft picks. First up, Tony Liebert, who has covered the Minnesota Golden Gophers for the Bleav Network and for goldgophers.com and is now covering them for Bring Me the News. So Tony is very familiar with second-round pick and new offensive tackle Aireontae Ersery. It's great to have you, Tony, and just kind of looking forward to your insight on Ersery.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love this landing spot for Ersery, and I think Texans fans are going to love him too.
What I know about Ersery so far is he is unusually fast for a big man. 6'6", 330, one of just four prospects at the combine to ever run a 5.05 40 or less at more than 330 pounds. And Todd McShay called him one of the three best tackles in this draft class. 419 snaps last year, just one sack. We love that here in Houston. And I Bleav he gave up just five sacks in 3 years as a starter. What else can you tell us, Tony, that's going to excite Texans fans about Ersery?
Yeah, so I guess not to get too hyperbolic, but when I was looking at potential landing spots, the Texans were a big one, obviously looking for a long-term replacement at left tackle for Laremy Tunsil. And if you laid out all of the scenarios for Aireontae Ersery's career, that is like top of the top, but they do have similar skill sets is basically what I'm getting at. They're both very athletic, and athleticism is the number one thing for Ersery. He's athletic enough to play tight end, in all honesty. He was a mainstay on the Gophers offensive line, classic Big Ten road grading offensive lineman, hard nose, high personality too. He is from Kansas City, but he really bought into the Gophers culture, which is always cool at the college level. He hated the rivals that the Gophers have. I just think he's going to be a great NFL player. He improved every year in college, and I expect him to do the same at the next level.
Now, didn't he shut down the third overall pick, Abdul Carter, when Minnesota played Penn State? No sacks for Carter in that game, right?
Oh, yeah. That honestly might have been the best game of his career. Not a lot of people were picking Minnesota in that game, and the Gophers held their own throughout the whole game, came up short in the end. And I think a big reason why was they were able to slow down Carter, which not many teams were able to. And I think a big reason why was Ersery, who showed why he deserved to be a top 100 pick, and he can have the same level of potential in the NFL.
He's a left tackle who did get 70 snaps at right tackle early in his career, but his best chance to play in his rookie season, maybe guard, Tony. Texans GM Nick Caserio said nobody thought Titus Howard could play guard until he did it. We're never putting limitations on what a player can or can't do. He's a tackle until he's not, unquote. So, Tony, can he handle guard, or has that even been discussed?
Yeah, I mean, at the college level, obviously he had all the traits to be a tackle, and that's where he was. But based on the athleticism, I think he could totally move into guard. I think he's willing to do that. He's a football player, and he just loves football, so I think he's going to do whatever he can to see the field right away. Oddly enough, you bring up Nick Caserio, and I remember this last season when the Gophers played Iowa at Huntington Bank Stadium, I was sitting next to Nick Caserio in the press box. So that could have been a big game for Ersery as well, and they're scouting for him. I wasn't able to talk to Caserio, but I knew he was intently watching the game, so it is kind of interesting to see how that works out now 8 months later about. So, I think he could totally move into guard. He has the athleticism to play either guard position or either tackle position, in my opinion. But if everything does work out well, I think he can be a long-term left tackle.
You said the magic words. You said he loves playing football, and that's the kind of guy that Caserio loves. I mean, they talk about that all the time. And NFL.com scout Lance Zierlein, who's also a local guy here in Houston, says Ersery's upside is an average tackle. What did you hear about his downside, if anything? What separated him from the first rounders?
I just wouldn't necessarily agree with him. I think he does have really high potential, and I think he has pretty high floor as well. I just think he's going to be a starter in the NFL for 10 years. I don't know if he's going to be a Pro Bowler, but it would surprise me if he wasn't able to stick in the NFL for a long time and get to that second contract, in my opinion. But the athleticism is what raises the potential, and he checks all the boxes. So I don't necessarily know where he's coming from with that. I'll admit I'm not a NFL grade level scout, and I respect Lance Erline, but he has all the traits, I think, to be an interesting project at the bottom line. So I don't necessarily know where he's coming from with that.
Ersery said he watched a lot of tape of Laremy Tunsil. It's a guy that he sort of modeled some of what he was doing after. If he can bring the Tunsil pass blocking without the penalties, I know Texans fans would love that. He had 3 penalties last season. Were they an issue at all, Tony, for him?
No, definitely not. There were a couple other offensive linemen on the Gophers that had issues with penalties, so that was not a talking point. It did not really stand out at all. The Gophers historically are one of the least penalized teams in the country, so I would not worry about that at all with him. Like I said, it just when I watch him play, I do see a lot of Laremy Tunsil, and you don't want to compare a guy to a multi-time All-Pro. I'm kind of sounding like the ESPN draft coverage here, but I think on the high end, Tunsil is a possibility.
That'd be good, at least, like I said, in some aspects for sure. Attitude, maybe not so much. That's a whole other story down here, Tony. I won't get into, but man, this guy's personal story is remarkable. His mom and 4 siblings bounced from place to place as kids, between beds or couches offered by family members in Kansas City, where he's from. And at one point, they were in a homeless shelter. His mom was usually working 3 jobs. They were constantly tearing eviction notices off doors, existing at times without running water. His story, real similar, actually, to Texans linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair, who also was homeless in high school. So, Tony, what do you hear about Ersery as a teammate, as a leader, about his personality? Can you give us a little bit about him off the field?
Yeah, I don't know how many people listening to this watch much Gophers football, but any player I think that comes from the University of Minnesota, as long as PJ Fleck's the head coach, character is not going to be a concern. He preaches really heavily being a life program and developing these guys who are young men into adults. And Ersery, I think, is a perfect example of that. You mentioned everything in his background that I guess held him back from reaching this point. And a program like the Gophers, I think, did a great job of almost embracing that. I think he's developed even more throughout his time with the Gophers. Small things, just like talking to media when he was early in his career to the end of his career. And he checks all the boxes. He might not be Laremy Tunsil, might not be an All-Pro, might not even be a Pro Bowler, but I just don't see how he's not going to be in the NFL for 10 years because I think he's got the right head on his shoulders. He's got a great support system around him, and he developed as a player at the University of Minnesota, but I think even more as a man.
If anybody's questioning this kid's desire, work ethic, or will, listen to this. In high school, he didn't just play tackle. He was a starting defensive lineman, long snapper, played basically nearly every down, barely left the field. And he didn't start playing high school football until his junior year, I believe. Tony, is that right?
Yes, that is correct. Just a great definition of a developmental prospect. He was relatively unknown when he came to the Gophers. Minnesota's not recruiting like Ohio State or Michigan or Penn State, but by the end, he was playing like an offensive lineman at one of those schools. So I think if you change the logo on his helmet, I think he would have been a first-round prospect. He just has so many traits you want to see from an offensive lineman.
Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of similarities between me and Ersery. There's about a foot difference and about 200 pounds. But one thing we did have in common, I noticed when he was chosen, the video showed he's wearing a Kansas City Monarchs cap, which is the same cap that I've got. So he's cool like that. So that was good to see. And, if anybody has any questions for Tony, you can follow him on X. If you want to ask him anything else about Ersery, it's at Tony Liebert. You can see it on the screen for you guys watching on YouTube. Just any final thoughts or, frankly, anything you want to plug before we take off here, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, last few things on Ersery. I just think he's a real loyal guy. Like I mentioned, he just bought into Minnesota, bought into the Gophers, and I fully expect him to do the same with the city of Houston and the Texans because he's loyal to his hometown in Kansas City. But I think he'll go head first into this. I have high expectations for him in the NFL. But yeah, you can follow me on Twitter or X for all the Gophers stuff at Tony Liebert, like Robert mentioned. And I think this is a great pick for the Texans, and I think fans should be excited.
One thing is not going to stop him, and that's this is a guy that's motivated and cares, and just incredible stuff. So thanks so much for giving us a few minutes. I know you're busy, Tony, up there, but really appreciate you informing the Texans fans on everything that we needed to know about Ersery.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, don't go anywhere, Texans fans, because in just a minute, I'm bringing in a Penn State insider on 6th-round pick safety Jaylen Reid. But before we roll on, a quick reminder that even though the Rockets season is over, the NBA playoffs are still your chance to score big. Every three-pointer and buzzer beater, an opportunity to win at MyBookie. Place your bets live as the action unfolds. Are you feeling confident? Lock in your winnings early with our quick cash out option. Never miss a chance to turn your basketball knowledge into real cash. And hey, are you new to MyBookie? Then sign up today with promo code MM50 and instantly boost your first deposit. If you deposit $50, MyBookie tosses in an extra $25. If you deposit $100, get a $50 bonus. More action, more excitement, and more chances to win during basketball's intense playoff season. Plus, when the games wrap up, keep the winning streak alive at MyBookie's casino with slots, blackjack, roulette, and more. The thrills never stop. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie. Joining me now, our colleague from the Bleav Network, Tom Hannifan, host of the State of State, a Penn State football show. So Tom covered Texans 6th-round pick safety Jaylen Reid, and it's a pleasure to have you, Tom. I hope the Texans have better luck with Jaylen than their last Nittany Lion drafted in the secondary, also named Reid. Did you cover John Reid?
I did cover John Reid. Yeah, he was somebody that Penn State fans, I wouldn't say they were in love with necessarily. At one point, you could have described him as Penn State's number one defensive back. I think the job that Terry Smith, the associate head coach at Penn State in charge of the defensive backs, the job he's done since, the talent that he's recruited since, has been far beyond that. So John Reid kind of had a feeling that that wasn't going to be the home run maybe that Texans fans were hoping it was going to be. But I think they're going to be pleasantly surprised by Jaylen Reid.
Yeah, totally different administration, better staff. So hopefully the Jaylen Reid thing works out a little bit better. And I just can't wait to hear about him because he's got a little buzz for a 6th-round pick. Sounds like a perfect fit in the Texans defense. NFL.com's Lance Zierlein projected him in the 4th round, 97 tackles last year, 3 interceptions. What can you tell Texans fans, Tom, to get them excited about Jaylen Reid? What are the positives?
The interesting thing about Jaylen Reid's 2024 season is it's almost looking at it like what could have been. And he had a very nice season to the stats that you just pointed out. For those that don't know, KJ Winston Jr., who was drafted by the Tennessee Titans, was supposed to be one of 3 defensive backs, 3 safeties specifically, under Tom Allen's defense. And you had Zakee Wheatley, who had an outstanding season and is still in Happy Valley. So it's supposed to be a 3 safety defense. KJ Winston goes down very early on in the season. Then Winston, I Bleav, is going to have a very bright career in the National Football League. But then Jaylen Reid went from playing kind of a hybrid safety linebacker position to having play a little bit more traditional safety. They still utilized him in a lot of different packages as a linebacker, as a blitzer. He was obviously talented in taking away the football. But my comp to him that I think Texans fans will like is he's a slightly bigger, more compact version of Jaquan Brisker, who's lighting it up right now for the Chicago Bears. Brisker, who was great at Penn State, one of those types of safeties who can play in between the tackles, not afraid to get his nose in there and really make an effect in terms of the running game and in the passing game. Obviously, I think my favorite thing about this is fit, because the Houston Texans defense showed a lot of promise last year, and he's joining what looks to be a really veteran secondary. So I think he's going to have a lot of people helping him along the way, and there's going to be a lot of different ways that he can be utilized in Houston.
This guy's kind of a pass rusher in a way as a safety from what I saw. Even though he was only credited with 2.5 sacks last season, he drew 4 holding calls. His pass rush Pro Football Focus rating was only behind Abdul Carter on Penn State. So that's some fun stuff to look at.
Yeah, it's the exciting thing is he played under both Manny Diaz and Tom Allen as defensive coordinators there in the back end of his time at Penn State. And Manny Diaz, much more of a blitz-happy defensive coordinator, and he likes to use defensive backs to get after the quarterback. So I think you had a little bit of that still left over. Tom Allen kind of changed things a bit, still wanted to utilize the 3-safety look, but obviously didn't have the personnel to do it with Winston going down. So I think Reid is going to be able to fill in at a lot of different spots. And again, I mentioned the veteran depth you have at safety for the Houston Texans. CJ Gardner-Johnson coming over from the Super Bowl champions, Philadelphia Eagles. Jimmy Ward, longtime San Francisco 49er. That doesn't feel like to me there's an immediate need for him to play, and obviously taken in the 6th round, more of somebody you're looking to supplement your secondary. But I think being able to utilize him in certain packages, utilize him on special teams especially, Jaylen Reid is going to be able to do a lot for this Texans secondary given the opportunity, and I think he's just going to have the time to grow, which is a real positive.
Feels like he's just destined to be here. He models this game after CJ Gardner-Johnson, says the Texans are his favorite defense, even approached a Texans assistant coach at the NFL Combine and told him he wanted to play for the Texans. The one thing Reid needs to make an impact, though, this season is special teams. Can you tell us anything about him on special teams? Have you seen much there, Tom?
Yeah, seen plenty, and just that he's a regular contributor, and that relentless motor that you've seen on the defensive side of the ball, those pass rushes, being able to get involved in defense against the run. He's the same on special teams, and he's going to be aggressive. And I think the one thing that James Franklin and this Penn State football staff have continuously reinforced is that if you're put on special teams and there's an eye on playing you at some point, defensively, offensively, it doesn't matter. If you don't put in the effort on special teams, you're certainly not going to see the opportunity on offense or defense somewhere down the line. So he's put in that effort, and he's a regular contributor in that department. So I think Texans fans are going to be pleased with the effort and the desire to get after it with the special teams play from Jaylen Reid. I think he just contributes in so many different places, and it's that work ethic. I think that's the beauty of anybody coming from this Penn State football program under James Franklin, is that he instills a work ethic and that he is preparing guys to be pros at the college level and to be ready for the National Football League. So Jaylen Reid, I believe, is going to be able to contribute in a lot of different places. And he's not one of those guys who's like, oh, I'm on special teams, this is not where I want to be. He's going to make the most of every single rep he gets.
What did you see and what did you hear from scouts that were concerns about Jaylen? What are his weaknesses?
I think he's listed at about 6 foot, so that might be a little generous. 210, as I was saying, a little bit more compact version of a Jaquan Brisker. I think his, straight ahead speed is something that, it could be something desired, but when you're playing safety, you can kind of get away with some of those things. Play recognition is really good in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, he was asked to do a lot, both in the secondary and against the run, as I mentioned a number of times. So I think Jaylen is, going to be somebody who is maybe not the best athlete on the field in terms of, is he going to be a shutdown safety of something like that? No, but I think his ability to contribute in a lot of different spaces, as I mentioned, is going to be his key to success long-term. I just think Jaylen, for him, it's going to be a matter of getting on the field because there is a lot of talent in this Houston Texans secondary. And even if you were thinking about bumping him out to corner or even utilizing him as a linebacker in some sort of situation, as you mentioned, that's a really good Houston Texans defense. So cracking the lineup and getting in there could be a challenge. So my gut is that he's going to be able to contribute in a lot of different places, starting with special teams. But defensively, for him, it's just getting on the field. And maybe the plan is to lean on those veterans for a little while and then get to a younger guy like Jaylen Reid in a couple of years.
Yeah, Gardner-Johnson, obviously not a long-term solution. Jimmy Ward, towards the end of his career. What I know about Reid personally is he's from a rough area of Detroit. He's talked about being somebody that guys from his neighborhood can look up to at some point. What can you tell us about Jaylen as a teammate and him personally?
Penn State has done a really good job in James Franklin's time of recruiting the Detroit area. And as you know, it is a tough place to grow up. It's a tough place to get out of. It's a tough place to ultimately build your resume and build your brand, that sort of thing. I've never heard a bad word about Jaylen Reid in terms of the teammate or the person at Penn State. As I mentioned, work ethic, character, those are extremely important things at Penn State. And I think there's so much conversation now in college football about guys that are more looking for the transaction than the transformation. And I think Jaylen's a really good example of a guy who underwent the transformation, not somebody who was just bouncing around place to place looking for NIL money, that sort of thing. Went to one school, stayed at one school, stayed true to that, trusted the development process. And I think so much, Robert, when you hear development, people are like, oh, that's a slow track. Like if he was really good, he'd have been doing X, Y, and Z, or he'd be in the first round, that sort of thing. Penn State's done a really nice job of recruiting the Detroit areas I mentioned, selling people on that development path. You see the way he developed, you see the way he performed in 2023, 2024 at Penn State, and it's preparing them to have that incremental growth and progress continue in the National Football League and not just plateau. So you're getting a person who is going to put in the work to get better every single year.
While I got you here, got to ask you about Juice Scruggs, another Nittany line that the Texans drafted just a couple of years ago. We're wondering where he fits in the offensive line puzzle right now. We've seen him at center and guard. Just out of curiosity, what can you tell us about watching and covering Scruggs at Penn State?
It was interesting. Another guy who I would say would be on that development path, and that every year I saw him get a little bit better at Penn State. The beauty of Phil Trautwein, the offensive line coach for Penn State, is that he cross-trains all of his offensive linemen. Now, for the most part, you're going to see guards who can play center, centers who can play guard, and then the opposite, tackles who can play guard, guards who can play tackle. You don't often see a tackle that can play center, and I think that's pretty normal at any level of football. But Juice was able to contribute at every guard and center position. I'd say his best days at Penn State were at center. His final season, he was starting at center for Penn State, and he played well. He was a surprise in that once he got drafted, he came in and played at a high level in his rookie season. So that was something that Penn State fans, I think, were pleasantly surprised about, because Penn State has had kind of a revolving door at center over the last few years. Hunter Norzad was a transfer from Cornell, came in after Juice Scruggs, and then you got to the Nick Dawkins era. Nick Dawkins is still at Penn State. So having a dominant center hasn't really been Penn State's thing the last few years, but having somebody capable that can bounce from position to position is really important. And as you well know, in this day and age in the National Football League, just like quarterbacks, offensive linemen are going to get dinged up, and you need to have guys who are talented and can fill out that depth chart, and especially play a lot of different positions. So I think that's the beauty of Juice Scruggs. I think in a perfect world, he's able to play at center predominantly, but he can do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what they do with him going forward. And I want to ask our listeners, what do you guys think of Aireontae Ersery and Jaylen Reid? Let me know in the YouTube comments. You can support us and get updates on every show that drops by subscribing on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up and listen while you're out and about with your favorite podcast app. Any last thoughts on Jaylen Reid, Tom? Anything that we missed?
No, honestly, I think you guys are getting a good one. And like I said a number of times here, is just I think there's a lot of different things that Jaylen Reid can bring to the table. It's low risk for the Houston Texans, taking him as a 6th-round pick. I mentioned it a couple of times. You have a veteran secondary, so there's not this need for him to play right away. But his ability to play safety, his ability to play linebacker, be a pass rusher, be a run stuffer, play in the secondary, play coverage very well, take away the football, go get sacks, play on special teams. It's about value. You're getting a true professional. You're getting somebody with character and work ethic. That's been important to the Houston Texans for a long time, regardless of who's been in charge, who's been the head coach. But you continue to see the Houston Texans taking Penn State football players, and there's a reason for that. So I think Jaylen Reid, you'll see him be a major contributor, maybe not this year, but give it a few seasons under that, tutelage of those veterans, et cetera. And I think you're going to see Jaylen Reid be a really nice piece for the Houston Texans in the future.
It's interesting to see how these draft experts have done with the Texans, because the draft experts say they picked one Jaylen way too early and Jalen Smith with USC, and they picked another Jaylen Reid much later than they thought he was going to go. So Jaylen Reid actually projected to be picked 4th round, like I said, and then Jalen Smith is somebody that, some of them had projected in the 6th or 7th round. He's at Tom Hannifan on X. Tell us about your show and anything else that you want to plug.
Yeah, check out State of State, a Penn State football show, anywhere you get your podcasts, YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Myself and former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King breaking down Penn State football every single week, the latest news, notes, game previews, and recaps during the season. We're literally covering the team 52 weeks a year. So anything you need in terms of Penn State football, we have it up to the minute. So thank you for checking me out on X and Instagram at Tom Hannifan, TomHannifan.
Fantastic. And just want to remind our listeners as well that did another one of these on the other draft picks, of 4 draft picks that were picked earlier outside of Ersery. So go and check that. We're going to put that link in just a few seconds. So just stay on this, and you can click the link right there on your screen. Really appreciate you doing this, Tom. Thanks so much for taking the time. I know it's busy, but this is fantastic.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.